All right, welcome back to Crestview Leads, where I, Tim Bolduc, get an opportunity to talk to people who've had influence in my life in the area of leadership. And so a while ago, we did full transparency, about 10 minutes ago, we shot a podcast with myself and Colonel Jason Grandy, and we were just getting ramped up as the time was running out. And so I asked him if he would hang out with me for a little while so we could do kind of an episode 2. So welcome back, Jason.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. During our last podcast, we got started. We got to cover kind of your coming through the military service and all that, and we really got into some of the things in leadership and how you keep a team together when you're going through a transitional period and really cool stuff. But we brushed over so quickly this idea or concept of burden of command, and I want to spend some time today talking about that. Is that cool?
That's absolutely cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So we when I talk about, well, I tell you what, why don't you tell us what you think of when I say or somebody says to you about the burden of command?
Yeah. So it's not only ensuring that the organization that you're in charge of is not just meeting requirements, but advancing in a particular way to a vision that you see, but it's making sure that the people who are doing that are taken care of, right? And so in an organization of about 1,700 at the 919 SAO, that burden is placed on an individual to make sure that the people are who are your most valuable asset are the ones who have to do all of this organizational change are well taken care of. And so that is, it becomes very much so an individual thing when, and I say very personal, more not so much individual, but very personal piece to the leadership aspect of command. Yeah, I talk all the time about when I talk about leadership in general, and we covered this the last time somewhat, but like people sometimes want to get to a position, and there's so much of a difference between getting that position or that authority or becoming the boss than there is becoming a leader. Mm-hmm. Leaders you can be a leader without position altogether, right? Maxwell talks about that. But when you are truly a leader, if you're ever going to be qualified to be considered or called a leader, I believe that your conduct as it relates to the people you're responsible for has to be relational. Would you agree that that's true? I would agree with you.
Right.
Yes.
And so what I tell my team all the time is that when you are growing as a leader and you understand that relationships mean everything, it's great because when times are good, you get to share in their joys when they have babies and when their kids graduate school and their grandkids are born or their kids get married. You get to celebrate all those joys, or they graduate college. But if you have that type or that level of relationship with them, when mom dies, it's hard. And when we fail as an organization, it's hard. And so what, to me, when I talk about like burden of command or the burden of leadership, it's that piece of the equation. I love the way you said it. It's not just about us technically getting done our work, but it's also the health of all the people around us. To me, that's the hardest part. Is the maintaining those relationships. It's not the maintaining of them, but it's the burden that it puts on us. Is that
right? Yeah,
the wear
because
and tear?
And that's one of the things that being in the 919th has been. It's actually made it a lot easier, and I say that because the Air Force talks a lot about being one big family, if you will. Right. And I think I've shared this with you before, but I never found that sense of belonging and family like I did when I became part of the 919th. And that was when I first joined in 2009 until now. Right. And so that family aspect of an organization and working together for a common goal and then realizing that because there's this family, people look at you like we need to take care of this family, right? And so it is a very personal thing and a very relationship-driven thing. Yep. And when things aren't good, the hope is that you've built those relationships strong enough so that when things aren't that good, people hang in there and they stick with you and they trust you and they believe in you.
Yeah. So. But because we have these these very deep relationships with people, has it ever crossed your mind that this job would be a whole lot easier if I didn't just care so much?
Absolutely. I would come home and my wife and I would go on a walk with the dog or something. And I know she remembers these vividly. So I would share with her some of the things that were going on. And almost all of them were this person struggling with a thing. And it wasn't, there was no specifics with any of it. It was just, I don't know how to help them, and that weighed heavy on me.
Yeah, I deal with that too, and our roles are a little bit different, but somewhat similar, right? So when I'll hear that somebody inside the organization say is going through some marital trouble, okay, or even something like that, that's not at all related to their job, but is related to their overall health, their overall joy in life, for lack of a better way.
But it affects their performance.
It affects their performance for sure. But also, so like for me, those are the ones that I struggle with so much. Yeah. If it's the technical side of things, if you can't figure out how to operate a water system or something I'll send you to school, we'll get you trained. Yeah. But it's those other pieces that are so hard to do. But I also think that the openness of the person or the individual that's in charge to expose ourselves to that type of pain, sharing in that kind of pain, is what makes you be able to or opens up the opportunities for you to be able to run an organization where people are going to give 100% because they know that you care about them. Yeah. So in your role though, you're getting so is there anything in particular, let me put it this way, is there anything in particular that you did to help you to be able to deal with those kind of things? Because we can't wear it all, right? I mean, we can't tell if you have gray hair or not. but when I took
I have quite a bit of gray hair.
When I took this gig, I didn't, I didn't have any. And we joke about it all the time. I was joking in a department head meeting this morning. The department head that just took over in the city of Fort Walton, a picture of him 3 months ago or 4 months ago, and a picture of him today. He's already got gray hair, and we were laughing about it or joking about it. But what people don't realize is it's because we wear the burden of all of these, what's going on in all the people we're responsible for his lives. How do you deal with that?
So one way is to find someone you trust, and have the ability to sometimes just vent. Yeah. Right. Or ask I have no idea how to do this. Yeah. What have you ever experienced something like this? But it's got to be somebody that you trust, and finding those people makes it a lot easier. Right.
How do we find them?
Well, over the years, I've had leaders who I've grown to trust because they were important to me. They took care of me as an individual, so I felt like they probably would have at least some of these experiences, and if they didn't, they'd know where to point me in the right direction, or at least just listen, right? Yeah. And allow that burden to come off for a few minutes by being able to share a problem, or just like any relationship, if there's something that's bothering you, sometimes you just got to get it off your chest.
You got to talk about it. Yeah.
And so, and quite honestly, my wife's been a big reason why I was able to keep it all together, if you will.
For sure.
Where she took a lot of the other burden of some of the family things that were required of us off of me, and she took it on herself because she knew the burden that I was dealing with at work was pretty big too. Yeah. Not that she didn't have her own to deal with. So she took one for the team. You know what I mean? Like she's an amazing lady anyway. She can do 1,000 different things all at once. I can't. Right. And so that's part of it too.
That's the exact role I'm in, right? So my wife is so much better at all that stuff than I am. And so I love that was the first go-to too. It's the same with me. Yeah. We walk as much as we can. We walk around where we live and talk about those kind of things, and that's how you deal with it. And then you brought up this idea of like, so on the technical side, it's these mentors, that we've gotten through our lives. Is there one in particular that you don't have to give names or anything like that, but is there like one in particular that you spent time with that you know now at any time you can pick up the phone and give a call to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So my previous boss was that for me. The one that just did the change of command. Her name's Regina Sabrick, Major General. I've worked for her twice, and I knew that as my boss, I could call her. Yeah. And she wasn't going to judge me. She was going to guide me through a problem set. And my previous wing commander, when I was the group commander, General Merrill, Merrill was a huge influence in that way, especially after he left, because I took over for him as the wing commander. So I knew I could call him anytime, and I still do. I call him all the time.
He just got a new assignment, didn't he?
He's at Air Force Reserve Command. Yeah. And so I'll call him, especially since he's been removed from it for a little while, where he can think maybe a little more clearly about a scenario. When you're neck deep in it, it's really hard to sometimes see the forest for the trees. But if you can find someone who at least understands where you're coming from, has been a part of the same organization, and you can say, hey, I got this thing. Yeah. Can you help me through this? Or just any personal thing too. I know I could call him anytime and he'd pick up the phone.
I love this part of this conversation, because a lot of times on here, and just quite frankly, in leadership podcasts in general, we all talk about these, different books you should read or trainings you should do, or what is the path of a career, and or even, what a leader is versus what a boss is, and all. We talk about all those things all the time, but what we don't talk about necessarily, and it's probably, maybe it's just me that doesn't, but is this idea or this understanding about the pressure that comes with it, and then what do we do to offset that pressure, right? I had Kelly Jason from the United Way on here, and we talked a lot about mental health in general, and how you with her, what we talked about was how you set aside enough time so that you can recharge and do the things that are necessary. Yeah. But like when we were, but I just don't think in the area and the preparation of leaders, we don't talk enough about that. Hey, listen, the higher up you go, the more relational you are. There's going to be burdens, and there's going to be deadlines you got to meet, and there's going to be tasks you have to accomplish. But there's also going to be people that you're responsible for, and those people are going to make bad decisions. Yeah. And then those people are going to have things that are out of their control happen to them. And then how do we deal with those? Those are the hardest part.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the other things that I learned. I knew, I just didn't put into practice, was how do you take care of yourself through this whole thing? Because if you're not resilient, you can't be what you need to be for everyone else, or it will just crush you over time if you don't do something about it, during your period of leadership. So, and I failed at this fairly miserably with taking some of that time away from work and to be able to recharge my own batteries in a significant way.
I think we were talking about that at the closure. You were saying that you had just got back from a vacation or something. You were like, I should have done this. I should have done
it a long time ago. And some of that was just me putting small chunks together. For me, I think what I realized is I needed bigger chunks of time. Maybe not as frequent, but just bigger chunks instead of small chunks on a more regular basis. I needed bigger chunks.
Yeah, you have to be able to figure out how to, especially with the number of people that you're responsible for. Holy cow! It's you gotta. There has to be a time that you're refilling the tank. Otherwise, you got nothing left to pour out. So.
And I think the other piece to the burden, at least in our organization, is it's never not there. Yeah. Right. So we all have, cell phones and computers that we can be reached at any time, any place, and it's always there, just kind of sitting there, and you're trying to have the ability to shut it off for a little while is something that I try to do.
My wife and I always joke about one in particular. I'm walking into church and got absconded by the door greeter. Yeah. And I love my church and I love everybody at my church, but I was like, it's a Sunday morning. The week is already tough enough. It's already there. And so hopefully she doesn't listen to this podcast, but I get absconded by the door greeter, and I'm walking on by her going, "Welcome to church." Yeah. The whole mood is set, but some, so like for what I do, it's a completely different responsibility to what you do. Like you keep us safe and free and all that stuff.
Well, responsibility nonetheless.
Nonetheless, right? And but I can't go to Walmart. I can't go to anywhere, and we can't go anywhere and get away from it. We take out from the restaurant because my wife she wants to have time with me when we go to eat dinner and things like that. So as leaders, I think it's so important that we figure out how to set aside the time to be with the ones that are important to us so that we can be that support system for them. Because one of the things too, and I wasn't going to chase this, but I'm going to chase it for just a minute, is that especially for us that are married, men and women that are married and that are in a position of authority, what happens to us a lot of times, I think, is that we we look at those people closest to us and we know that they love us. And so they're going to give us a little bit more grace than the rest of them. Right. And so we take and say, sometimes we have a habit of saying, listen, like for me, I would say, Kim's going to be okay. She'll always be okay. I need to focus on this problem over here. But the problem is we do that so often that we forget that it's been 10 and 15 times that I put her on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something, would you agree we got to be?
Oh, we got to very much so focus on not doing that.
Right, and be intentional about it.
That's right. Yep.
Hopefully our wives don't listen to this and go, they don't believe any of that crap. No, that's so good. But I just wanted to get that on there. One other thing I wanted to talk about with you that I was very impressed by the programs that the 919th as a whole has implemented, and especially in the 2SOW, I think it's called 2SOS.
At 2SOS,
At the 2SOS side have implemented as it relates to overall mental health, right? And so the burden of the job that the 919th does is keep us safe. So we'll leave it at that, right? Okay. They're out there keeping us safe, and they do tough things to keep us safe. And so there's a lot of responsibility that's put on young airmen to do that.
Yes.
I think that's a fair way to say that. And so you guys have done a lot to make sure that you protect the mental health of those troops. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, let me start with a little background on this one. In that, when I grew up in the Air Force, it was you didn't talk about this,
right?
So, and if you did, especially as an aircrew member, pilot, you believed anyway that the wings on your chest were in jeopardy anytime you brought up mental wellness or mental health. To the extent where, if you wanted to go seek couples counseling.
Yeah,
it was seen as a mental health thing, and it was not that it was forbidden, but you always felt like you were running the risk of probably jeopardizing some of your career aspirations when it came to flying. Yeah, and again, there's probably very little truth to that, but that's where everyone believed it was going. So mental wellness was something that was you're on your own. And so
chuck it away, rub some dirt on it.
Yeah, right. And so over the years, it's become much more of a very acceptable thing to seek. And what we believed more so, and this is a lot of years of going through this, was if you tackle the problem before it becomes a problem, then you don't need some of those advanced mental health professionals to have to engage. And so and I believe Special Operations Command, so SOCOM, believe that as well. And I say that just from they invested in it, right? They invested resources to make sure that the right people were in place to be able to help people before it became a crisis.
Right.
And so we were the beneficiaries of that. And what we wanted to make sure was that it was deliberately focused in certain areas where the vulnerability to those kinds of things were pretty high. Yeah. And those 24/7 missions that you mentioned, the 2nd SOS and the 311th SOIS down at Hurlburt, very much so are in the muck every day. Right. And we believed that there needed to be a very deliberate presence there.
Yeah, and one of the things that so some of the people that pay attention to this type of a podcast are going to be other municipalities. And so when I was talking to you about it, what immediately hit me was this idea or this concept of embedding people into the system that would build natural relationships with your troops. And then by doing that, creating this safe environment for them, and I hate the idea or concept of even using the term safe space, but it would create this relational equity. Let's put it that way, this relational equity to open the door for communication when it was necessary.
Very much
and
so.
I thought so much of my police officers and my firefighters. These guys sometimes they'll do a call and somebody's decided to say take their own life. They deal with a teenager who's been injured or someone who's been through all of that stuff, and they're doing it day in and day out. And much of what they're growing up years. Now the younger generation of the firefighters and police officers, it's a little bit different, but our generation, my generation, I'm probably older than you are. My generation of them, I don't know, we both got grandkids, it's probably pretty close. Yeah. So anyways, our generation of those police and firefighters, it was the same thing. You don't talk about it, right? And that's why we see marriages go by the wayside. We see kids that aren't healthy. We see substance abuse in the area of like alcoholism and things like that, is because there wasn't. So you guys came up with, or somebody came up with this idea of embedding in the organization the people for them to talk to. Chat about that a little bit.
And so it's not necessarily mental health professionals. It can be specific to some of the folks down at Hurlbrook. Now, while there are embedded clinical psychologists and things like that are available, some of the other people that are just as much an important part of the equation are athletic trainers, right? Who get to see the physical well-being of someone. And if some of that physical well-being doesn't match what they're saying, then that also can be someone who's there to help them, right? At the end of the day, if you don't feel well, you're probably not going to perform well too, which is also going to affect some of your mental wellness as well. So the part of that team is not just the mental wellness side. It's the physical wellness. It's the social wellness. It's the spiritual wellness. And so some of the other parts and pieces of that team is, and we talked about this before, was our chaplain corps and how we deliberately built a more robust chaplain corps with the resources that we had so that everyone had access to that kind of resource that if they felt comfortable in that manner, had that person to reach out to. And so that was also very much so an important piece to this. So
you guys even, to that extent, you've got at least 3 different areas. So you've got the chaplain course, you've got the spiritual component, you've got the health. So you've got the health component, and then you've got the mental health because you've got the clinical psychologist in there. I love that idea. Since that conversation, I have been trying to figure out how to make that work with our first responders in particular. I'd love to have it around so that anybody that needs to deal with it, but in particular those first responders, because they're up against. I don't want to get too far into the story, but I've worked with and talked to cops who've had to respond to a particular call, and on that call, there's some bad things have happened to kids, and then they go home and they have to love on their kids. And so trying to figure out how to, and interesting in the conversations is sometimes they're saying, well, I create a little bit of a barrier there so that I'm not because somehow in their mind they think they can compartmentalize. If they create some separation between them and their son, then when they see somebody else out there, they can do what they have to do, and it's just it breaks my heart.
It may not only be just the barrier of I want to protect other people from this thing. It could be I'm not allowed to talk about this. With my family, and so you also need someone who has access to what you have access to in order to be able to communicate as well. And that is part of that team where they have access to what the mission is and why it's there. Not all the details, but enough so that they can be a part of that conversation in a real way that they're allowed to share. And so, and I think the best part of that whole thing is that they are part of the team. And when they're not there, people know they're not there. Because they're so used to seeing them there. So they are just as much in the squadron as any other member of the squadron, and that relationship over a long period of time helps create that comfort too, where people are willing to reach out and go, I've got a thing that I need some help with. Which one of you can help me with this particular thing? And any of them would be able to say, hey, I'm not the right person for that, but this person is. You need to go talk to them. Then the willingness of people to actually start doing it has changed, which is great. And
it will, that success will definitely breed success. So the more the door gets opened and the more they see their peers, what's so interesting is what maybe was looked at as weakness before turns into a strength.
Absolutely.
Because that opens the door, kicks the door down for the next person the next person and the next person. And so for us, just leaders in general, what I want to make sure this podcast gets across and we get a chance to take away from here is that we want to grow our people technically. We want to make them into great leaders. We want to do all of these things. But at the same time, we do, I think, have to be paying attention to that mental health component of it, the burnout, the work-life balance, the how do we deal with the stressors. And in order to do that, I think as leaders, we may not need to understand everything about the function of their job, but we probably need to understand the burden to some extent so that we can make sure that we connect the right resources to offset that burden.
100%. And you've got to be able to trust as well that people are singing out to you as a leader for the things that they need. And so that's part of building some of that team is for people to know that they can come to you with a request for a resource or something like that too, that because they've got a great idea on how to take care of people, but they've got to be willing to do it too.
I love too that because they're embedded in the system into the unit, I guess is that the way it would be, the unit. Here it would be, if I could embed them into the organization, I would be able to ensure that they were bought into what we are, one city, one mission, that we're here to improve the quality of life by providing exceptional municipal services. And that means that when our cops are there, that they're going to treat you the best they can treat you in the worst scenario you're ever going to be in, right? And so by having them embedded in the organization, then I know that they also believe what we're doing. I tell my team all the time, if what we're doing is right and what we're doing is good, the product will sell. I don't need to convince you of it if it's good. If I can explain it to you and it is good, you're going to own it too. And we believe that what we do is good. I know that what you do is good, and what we both do is important. And so having somebody on the team that also believes that it's important, that can also help to care for that mental health side, would be just fantastic. And it's something that, man, I loved learning that. I think I told you at that graduation ceremony that if I take nothing else away from this, that understanding was worth it for me.
Yeah, and if you could find a way to resource something like that, it would be forever changing. In a positive way.
We're definitely going to do it. I haven't figured out exactly how and whether I'm going to try to share that burden with SO or something, but I'm going to figure out a way. And I loved something I didn't pick up on necessarily when you said it, but I just got it now, was about the physical health component of it too. Having somebody who helps to make sure that is somebody they trust. That's not, a lot of times my HR director is going to want to cut this one, but like we'll bring in some fat person to tell us how to eat. And so they'll come in to talk about diet with us. And I'm like, why would I eat the same thing? But having somebody here who, because what we eat affects how we sleep. What we eat affects whether or not we get tired in the afternoon, or whether we're, how we get hangry, how we treat people when we get hangry.
So it's nutrition, but it's also, am I in pain? Right. And what do I need to do to relieve the pain that I'm in? And that could be very much so, maybe you're doing a workout wrong, and the people that are embedded with you can teach you how to do it correctly. And so living in pain is no fun. Right. And so if you can find a way to do that without prescription medications or something like that, eating well and working out correctly and not hurting yourself, it makes a world of difference.
Well, man, we're about out of time again. I appreciate you hanging out for this second episode with us and being here, man. You know what I'm thinking, though? At the end of this, I'm thinking it's going to be a shame you're not going to be in command of somebody. That part
I'm not sure what I'm going to do with myself.
Well, not only that, I think we in the Air Force in general are going to miss out on that while you're off doing whatever you do in the basement.
I appreciate you saying that. Thanks.
But go and do good things, man. Obviously, go up there and then come back, which Amanda's staying, so you'll be back. So that's a good thing. We appreciate you. I appreciate all the time I got to spend with you at the 9/19th and what you've done for our country and what you do for us here locally. Thank you so much.
You bet. I'm grateful that you were part of our team too.
Thanks. Yeah, it was good times. It was good times. Got to fly in a plane and all kinds of stuff. For those of you who watch the podcast, thank you so much. Like it, share it. We're on all the different podcast platforms. You can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, the one on iPhones, all the whole 9 yards. We're on all of them. So check us out, like us, and share us, and have a good day. And that's why Crestview leads.